Right, moving swiftly along to Surah 11, right? Surah 11, right? And this chapter, this surah, I am expressing or encapsulating, because encapsulated within the chapter is what are some of the things necessary to make you a Muslim, right? What is a Muslim, right? And going through some of the criteria, right? The criteria required for you to be a Muslim, right? Of course, others can build on this knowledge and add to the list. This is simply a mere, it is an expression within one of the chapters, right? An expression within one of the chapters of the book, right? Surah 11, right? So what? First thing, right? Understand that there are verses within the book that are perfected, right? Understand that there are verses within the book, verses within the book that are actually perfected, right? And those who are wise and aware would understand this, right? 2, to not worship any other than Allah, right? To not worship any other than Allah. There's no deity, there's no God except Him, right? 3, seeking forgiveness of God and being repentant for your past sins, right? Doesn't mean that you have to be repentant for the rest of your life, but acknowledge that past mistakes were made, ask for forgiveness, repent, move on, right? That's 3, right? Be modest, right? Be modest, right? Clothing, right? You dress appropriately. Do not repeat past cycles. If you have dressed in particular ways, right? Dressed in particular ways and carried on with particular behaviors in the past, you rectify that, correct that, right? Dress modestly does that mean you have to wear hijab, face coverings, all that? No, it doesn't, right? It doesn't. You have a choice whether you want to wear hijab or not. These things came from particular traditions, right? Some people like their hair, that's fine, right? Liking your hair is not the same as being vain about it, right? You can feel free to like your hair, right? And everybody should in fact like their hair, right? So you don't need to cover your head. If you choose to do that, so be it. If you choose to extend your modesty to that degree, so be it. You don't have to, right? At the same time, it is understood that being modest on the outside is not being clean on the inside. Doesn't mean the same thing, right? So we have to have an understanding of both outer modesty and inner modesty, right? Next, do not despair and be ungrateful, right? So if something happens to you in life, adversity happens, try to always relate it, right? Or come to relate it in the aftermath or during, right? After you've gone through, come to relate to that situation in a bit of a positive manner, right? Do not despair about it, right? Do not despair about it, and do not be ungrateful for it, because it would have taught you certain things that you needed to know, right? Next, 5. Refrain from being exalted and boastful, right? If you've been given certain things in life, right? Do not boast about it. Do not be exalted about it. Do not boast, right? Next, patience, right? Patience is one of the key requirements in this way of life. Having patience even mean being patient for your own past in a way, right? Being patient is one of the keys in this way of life, even if it means being patient for your own past, right? Next, know that the Quran was revealed with the knowledge of Allah, right? So it is not a book written by man, right? It's not a book written by man, but it's a revelation, right? It's not a book written by mankind, but in fact it's a revelation. So accepting the Quran as a revelation, right? Accepting the Quran as a revelation, right? Next, you refrain from intentionally averting people from the way of Allah, right? You refrain from, stay away from averting people from the way of Allah, right? So you see people following a particular path, you don't go and try to intentionally tempt them or lead them away from that path, right? You see somebody on a particular path, you don't try to go and avert them from the path if you know that they are in fact on a righteous walk or a righteous path. You let it be, let that person be, right? That is an act of service, selfless service that person is doing. Well, you don't come and try to interrupt or do anything to sway that person from that way of life, right? Next, righteous deeds and humility, right? So to be Muslim is actually to be humble in the face of the Creator, right? To be humble, metaphorical face, to be humble before the Creator, right? To break yourself down, right? To actually break yourself down and acknowledge, hey, there is actually no common G God, right? There is no demigod, right? There is God and there is just God. There is God and there's just the creator of the God, of the world, right? Right, that's that. Next, this is 11:37. It says, construct a ship under Allah's observation and inspiration, right? What this means, right? This means to build on knowledge, right? Build on knowledge, right? So you don't have to reinvent any wheel. There is nothing new under the sun, right? What needs to be done is what? You reiterate the messages, right? Reiterate that which is true, right? You don't need to reinvent the wheel and build a whole next something else, right? The message has already been there, right? So you build on that, you share that, you reiterate that, right? And you can choose to do that in whatever way you wish to do, right? It don't have to be online. It don't have to be. It could be in any way. In your conversations with your friends, it could be at the side of the road. It could be driving in a vehicle. It could be online here. It could be anything, right? Next, right? You do not treat women or other females, right? If you are male looking at this, you do not treat women or other females. Think about if you were to be in the position of a father, right, or a brother to somebody, to a female. If you are dating a female, if you are courting a female, if you are, in the Trinidad term, liming a female, think about if that female were to be your daughter, or if you were to have a daughter, or if you were to have a sister or a mother, right? And you treat that person with the respect that you are supposed to treat your mother, sister, daughter. You treat the female, that woman who you are dating, liming, courting, right? As though you have the respect for that person, like you would have or you would want a man to have respect for your own daughter, right? So that is what this is referring to, right? Interpretation of 1179. Right. 85. Give full measure and weight in justice, and do not deprive people of their due, meaning that do not spread abuse and corruption on the earth, right? Do not spread abuse and corruption, and this has to do with the hoarding of wealth. Right, this has to do with the hoarding of wealth. So this is what we are doing, right? This is the aim, is to what? Free the earth, right? Free earth, right? Free earth meaning free and free people on earth regarding money, regarding wealth, regarding all these things, so that people can be free, right? Have freedom of accessibility to needs, right? To that which they righteously desire, all these things, right? Freeing earth. Next, you rely on Allah, right? Rely on Allah, sufficient understanding that sufficient, when you are a true Muslim, what sufficient is Allah as your ally, right? Next, understanding accountability, right? Understanding accountability, right? So I've done certain things in the past. It's up to me to rectify those things, change my behavior and move on, right? I've done certain things wrong in the past, you've done certain things wrong in the past, rectify behavior, move on, right? Right, and finally, establishment of prayer, right? And this doesn't have to necessarily do with following T, what the prophet of the past did, right? The book says the prophet would have prayed 5 times a day. The book says Allah intends ease, right? The book says establish prayer at 2 ends of the day, right? This could be what? Dawn and dusk and at night time, right? So connect with God at dawn and dusk as a form of remembrance, and remember God before you go to sleep, right? Good deeds, in fact, do away with past misdeeds, right?